As you all know, this is a free event, and it's really important to us to be able to offer this to you all as a free event, especially to Ukrainian psychotherapists, to give support during this time of war. And I'd like to thank the speakers who make this possible, because all of our speakers today are not receiving a fee for their presentations. They are gifting this to the symposium. They are gifting their expertise to you, and we thank them for this very generous and altruistic offer that they make, that makes it possible for these to be free symposiums. And we hope to be able to continue with this as we go into future symposiums, taking us into the future. So I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Khrystyna Turetska. Good morning, Khrystyna. I will introduce...
Добрий ранок, Патрісія.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll just introduce you and then invite you to give your presentation. So Khrystyna is Associate Professor at the Department of Psychology and Psychotherapy at the Ukrainian Catholic University in the city of Lviv. She's also a psychotherapist in the European Association for Psychotherapy, and she's going to speak to us today about transgenerational transmission of trauma and its reactivation in wartime, a case presentation. Thank you, Khrystyna.
Дякую, Патрісія.
Thank you, Patricia. I was actually presenting the speech at the Conference of Ukrainian Association of Psychotherapists, so some of my colleagues have heard it already, but it has pretty bright senses, and it shows how Ukrainians are living through this war and how this living through the war reactivates trauma of past generation. My idea was actually to demonstrate this. At the beginning there will be short theoretical introduction, and then I will demonstrate clinical vignette of the working with one of the patients. Right now I will share my screen. Just a second. The one with the translation. So, transgenerational transmission of trauma and its reactivation in wartime, a case presentation. Impact of mass trauma. There can be different types of mass traumas. It can be natural disasters, some kind of tsunami or fires, even though such anger of nature can create to anxiety, but the victims of such mass destructions perceive it as the will of God or fate, and absolutely different group of events. It is much injuries due to the deliberate actions of enemy groups which occur during wars and military situation. When mass trauma is a result of such exact conditions, then there is a specific enemy or hostile group that deliberately causes the victims, the other group, a state of pain, suffering, and helplessness. According to Volkan, after mass trauma, members of large group will experience a combination of the following shared experiences. It is a feeling of victimization and transferred dehumanization, a feeling of obvious pain, hidden shame, and humiliation due to one's own helplessness, guilt of those who survived the death of others, inability to assert oneself, growth of externalizations or projections, strengthening of bad superstitions, growth of narcissistic investment in the identity of a large group, envy of the prevailing party and protective identification with it, difficulty or even inability to mourn losses. If we continue all those, if this experience persists and people cannot find adaptive solutions to them, they become involved in the tense shared experience. It is transferred to the next generation of the psychological task of coping with the impact. So, transmission to the next generation. Let's start with the innovative, for its time, groundbreaking research of Judith Kastenberg and the impact of the Holocaust on the second generation that led her to the description of the transgenerational transposition of trauma. Kastenberg's patient, Rachel, seemed to live in the reality of her father's past, refusing all social contact, hiding like her father who escaped from a concentration camp. Kastenberg recognizes that what is at work in second-generation victims is not covered by the concept of identification. That is tantamount to immersing the patient in another reality and holistically involves the patient's body. The patient lived the life of her own father. Ilse Grubich-Simitis broadened our understanding of transgenerational transformation of trauma. She focused on the effect of the conditions in the death camps on the ego's ability to use metaphors and the related ability to structure past, present, and future time. She noted that such ego disruption can produce a timeless concreteness in mental functioning that manifests itself in the second generation. Grubich-Simitis relates this to the unrealization of the psychotic universe in the death camps, which resulted in the destruction of intrapsychic reality. Fonagy and Target write, we have used the term mental equivalence to refer to this mode of mental functioning that Grubich-Simitis calls concrete one, as opposed to a metaphorical one. The fantasies of the patient, who is the carrier of the trauma, are as powerful as the events in the physical world. In other words, there is no room for as if for such a patient. A fantasy threat is equal to a real one. Vamik-Volcom proposes the concept of embedding trauma. Attachment is closely related to the identification process observed in the childhood. When embedding the other, an adult actively pushes his specific self-images and internalized objects into the child's self-representation. With the help of investment of this embodiment, the person who performs it externalizes her problematic images into the child's self-representation in order to get rid of these images. In other cases, contributors externalize desired or idealized images to keep them alive in the next generation. And now let's move to a clinical vignette that might actually illustrate the theoretical part. A woman, around 40 years old, came to her consultation. I have good work. I'm a scientist. I'm an assistant professor. I am the PhD. I have a huge amount of publications. I have successful marriage. I moved to a town where I always wanted to live, but I want to get out of the window. The patient is not able to inform anything about her internal life. She is very alexithemic. She feels in her days with intellectual job, and she does it as a well-oiled machine, well-programmed machine. Within all these years, she hasn't taken vacation even once. One more thought that is eating this patient inside is that she just has to, she just must start her own business, but she cannot. Analytical mind already calculated lots of thousands of variants. She weighed all pros and cons. She developed the strategy, but she hasn't made even one step to this result. Session after the session, from different perspectives, she informs me about her sorrow. Without her own business, she's no one, but she cannot move from that place. My mom once told me, "Who are you? You are just a PhD. You understand? I am just a PhD." The first impression, pretty negative, extremely negative. It was the first time when I did not like that patient. I was not interested in this patient. It was difficult for me to work with her. I didn't accept her. It was boring. It felt like I had to plough through this dry land, and I really had doubts that something alive might get out of this land. But the patient was ready to long-lasting therapeutical journey, and I was ready to research reasons of my such sudden and negative countertransference. Medical history, anamnesis. The only child of mother who was a teacher. The father was also a lecturer in a higher educational institutions. He left the family when the patient was around 5. Her mom told, "We don't need them." He left us. Probably in countertransference, I almost repeat the same pattern. I almost made her not needed for myself. I almost rejected her as not a loved child. But in therapies, I had other patients whose parents left them. Why? Around her uselessness, about those constant, endless attempts to get her place under the sun with her perfect work, why we discuss it so often and so much. Why it's so difficult for me to let her in my heart? It's a question to many of my next supervisions. It was such an impression, very vague one, somewhere between her words, that the patient was just put into this life as in some kind of soulless system. Her memories about the school, about the university, were like yellow pages of Soviet newspapers about builders of the future. She step by step was going through all stages. She was demonstrating successes, showing results. She herself is a feed part of the system in that way that she's identified with the aggressor. Therapy. The therapy during sessions demonstrated something that Fonagy called non-mentalization. She is not capable to metaphorical discourse. She was looking for real, specific measures from her fantasy fears. With amazement, with wonder, and then with horror, I was observing this terrible work on safety that she was doing all the time when she was, for example, buying the flat. She was considering everything, the depth, the foundation, the ground water, how almost seismic activity was taken into account. She had to take into account absolutely everything. And it was such a huge work with the documents that she had with the lawyers. They took into account all smallest details, all nitty-gritty details. And it was the whole operation when they were involving security company while giving money. So she is stuck to this reality and she compulsively owns it. All my attempts to interpret it symbolically were faced with total total resistance. She's not capable for psychic life, mental life of other mode. For a long period of time, my patient is the mode of equivalence that Fonagy was writing about. The external reality was not for her as if threatening, it was really threatening. This psychic equivalency also reflected in imagination of the patient. When I offered her to imagine nice field, she imagined it. She imagined that it is very nice weather, a branch, a well that she can take some water from. When I asked her what she wanted to do, the patient answered that she wanted to put a sunscreen on her. In this pleasant place, she was not for a very long time because she had to rush and she immediately gets out of this image. What could the sunscreen mean? This desire to have at least some kind of layer between herself and the world, the protection from her very intrusive mother, and also my attempts of interpretation didn't find any reflection here. Cream is just cream. She always applies it. It doesn't matter whether it's reality or imagination. In other words, this internal fantasy threat is as real as the external one, and each of them requires real protection. The equivalency does not give the opportunity or makes it more difficult to work in creative fantasy manner. So everything that we try to repeat is the attempt to work through our traumas. Everything that is spontaneous, primary, it is the zone free from our traumatic experience, according to Roman Kachur in his article Traumas of the Past and Safety of the Future. Patient is afraid or actually cannot try anything new. She cannot create anything. She goes in circles reproducing the past embedded trauma. So then we have one more topic, slowly, that it slowly appeared. We have this anxiety, this helplessness, and the carrier of such feelings already in the third generation is my patient. The parents of her mother were wealthy villagers from the western part of Ukraine, together with two children, mother and uncle of that patient. They were repressed to Siberia. They left all the assets that they had. And actually, the patient once remembered this talk of her mom. It was this freight train that they were carrying them around. They had nothing to eat. Her mother, still very small child, understood very clearly that she was just yet another mouse, that without her it would be easier to survive for them. And then it was very cold Siberian barrack, and once again she's yet another mouse. She cannot work, she cannot help her parents. It is impossible to imagine without fear what was this little girl living through, this mother of this patient. And together with the patient, we slowly came to understanding that her mother, through all her life, brought this trauma of yet another mouse, someone that it's easier to get rid of, or someone who should do everything possible not to be yet another, to be useful. The mom dealt with this trauma while identifying with the aggressor. She became this exemplary Soviet person, the small screw in the mechanism, the function, the teacher of the mass, even her personal daughter. We can only imagine what was going on in this dyada when for mother it is dangerous to fantasize. But here I would like to focus on another thing, on this mechanism of embedding. It seems to me that the mother made this patient a carrier of this part of herself, this traumatized one, this not needed part. She embedded in her daughter something that she couldn't work through on her own. And that patient, throughout all her life, was trying to get out, to unroot the psychic reality with perfect marks, work, achievements, but everything is in the dry land. Now she is this yet another mouse. Without understanding, without working through this encapsulated trauma was the only psychic reality. And one more reality was absolute helplessness in the face of the system and constant attempts to choose all walls and all foundations. And my patient found herself in the clinch. On the one hand, she had to create something of her own. She had to create her own business to fight this feeling of helplessness, to repair this lost object and to reconstruct a deficit of self. But on the other hand, to have something that is your own means that it can be taken away from you at any moment. It can be confiscated. It can be decolocized. And you are helplessness. To have something that is your own is to constantly be afraid that you might lose it. And we also understood it while in the therapy. It was the journey that lasted 8 years. The patient ended the therapy. She was satisfied with her own life. She's a teacher. She is writing articles. She's playing tennis and piano. She has great relations with her husband. Her anger at him disappeared somewhere. She does not want to get out of the window anymore. And it could be a great end of the case, but the war. She again came to me almost 1 year after the beginning of the war, the patient. Inside of me, I fear this black hole. I do not see any sense of doing anything. Yes, I do something. I hold lectures, I'm writing, but why? What for? I have absolutely no future. Somehow on the intuitive level, I understood that now I shouldn't tell her that the life has sense, because she's full of pain, of of this sorrow, and we need some kind of container. We need transformational object, according to Ballas, that can care about her and can create this implicit transmission of her wounded self, the patient. You know, Da Vinci, it is famous Ukrainian soldier of this war that demised. He's from my mother's village. It actually could have been the case that he's my family, but I don't know about this because everything is lost. From our village, almost every third person was repressed. Those who were rich, some of them went to Ukrainian insurgency armies. They were destroying our identity, and they keep destroying us now. You saw this video when the man is saying glory to Ukraine as he is killed. Because of that, the video where Russians are killing Ukrainian prisoner of war. They want to kill me for saying glory to Ukraine. She's crying. I understand that it is not a metaphor. I understand that my patient is now functioning in the mode of equivalency, and she really feels this threat to her existence. The patient. I have no relatives. When it's Christmas, people get together, but I do not have relatives. My story is such a global story of losing generation. My children are far away. I do not have any kind of continuation. This is loss of generation. I feel alone. I do not have the situation, you know, as it is somehow when we all gather and we do something together. My daughter, when she gives birth, she says me, come, visit me, because the daughter of the patient left the country she's living in, Germany. She was living there even before the war, but she does not have place for me in that flat. They have such a flat that I can sleep only in the living room. The therapist is saying, it feels like you do not have place anywhere for yourself, the patient. Yes, it might sound very strange, but I do not want to play with that child. This child will not even speak Ukrainian. It looks like this trauma is again ready to get embedded into the new generation. In the soul of my patient, there is no space for this child, for the new life that is growing inside of her daughter. The therapist. It's as if building something is absolutely senseless, the patient. Yes, I do not see any sense. The sense of my patient is attacked on two sides. Once again, she is in reality that when her land can be taken away, her motherland can be taken away, she's losing her place yet again. But on the other hand, she's losing the place and she's losing her thoughts. She's once again yet another mouse. She's so frustrated that she even she decides not to talk with her daughter. Every week she texts her in Viber asking how is everything going. The anxiety and helplessness of my patient is so strong that I start thinking about actually medication support. But we continue working, and suddenly something unexpected happens. Transformation of the trauma. The patient. I talked with my daughter at last. They are in London right now. They are resting, but she got ill. And she also has problems with her movement. It's so difficult for her. And yeah, just let it go, you know, because I kind of feel at ease with this right now. If I can be without them, then I am going to do that. When I cannot live without them anymore, then I will start thinking about it. The therapist, that's good for you, the patient. Yes, and also I understood. I am going to write a book. I am talking about this constantly. I am telling everyone about different kinds of threats, about different dangers. I will write about it. The therapist. That is one more great news. I'm so happy for you. Inside of me, I am amazed. At one moment, we had this shift. The symptom of the patient, her constant fear, transformed into creative product. Beta elements transformed into alpha elements. She will write the story, the patient. My daughter is giving birth to a child, and I'm going to write a book. And you know, when I got this idea in my head, at the birthday of my mom, the 12th of May, and I was thinking about it on the 13th of May. The therapist, do you have some kind of symbolism in it? The patient, yes, she helped me. The patient asked to hug me at the end of the session. I agreed. It was such a drastic contrast between my feeling of gentleness and amazement in comparison with that first not acceptance of her. She found her place in my heart. At the last session, I offered her to imagine a protected landscape, comfortable landscape where she can plant some kind of fruit tree. She imagined a meadow that is covered with a dome, summer day, lots of shadows, lots of coziness, and she wanted to plant an apple tree. She imagined how from the small seed sprout appears. That's great. Life appears like that. Then I offered her to imagine the tree that will appear out of the sprout. Now it was an oak, like in the movie Forrest Gump. It was huge. It was solid. It was white. The patient tried to touch the bark. She was touching this oak with her cheek. Then she sat down and was near it and just was reading her book, and it was very calmful for her. And then the dome disappeared itself. There was no need in this dome anymore. After the image, she remembered that in this movie, Forrest Gump buried his mother under the oak. That is the sprout. The picture, she sent me this picture of the sprout. And that's the tree. Also, she sent me this picture. Thank you. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Khrystyna. Thank you for the very detailed case presentation. I think it's helpful to us that you went through every stage in such a detailed way. And I'm very struck about how the relationship between you as the therapist and your patient changed from being, you felt a little bit distant from her to start off with, a little bit removed from her. But once the transformation had happened, once the trauma that she was carrying from the earlier generations was resolved, then suddenly you felt that she had a place in your heart. So it just speaks so beautifully about relationships at the heart of our work, but also at the heart of a transformation like that, and a transformation in trauma. So thank you very much for your presentation to us this morning. Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia, for your great feedback.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you.